entrepreneurship is about theory and practice. And what we heard today is an enormous amount of practice. And so what I'm going to give you is a little bit of the theory. And I just want you to remember that, reading all the books in the world and going to all the conferences and reading my stuff and Eric's stuff, at the end of the day, the ratio should be about 100 to 1 of practice to theory. It's not about reading it, as you all know, or for those of you who've been doing it, it's about doing it. But because I'm now an educator, in this talk, I'm going to talk a little bit about entrepreneurial education and maybe a little bit about what we've learned in the last year about teaching entrepreneurship and also about some new insights on the business model canvas. So the first thing I want to just tell you is some of the things we used to believe and some of the things we now know. Now, we used to believe that entrepreneurship can't be taught. All the entrepreneurs are born and, this is it, and you can't learn anything. You either got the DNA or not. And I struggled with this because I guess I was trying to teach entrepreneurship and realized that we were actually framing the question wrong. It was an incorrect frame. It wasn't, can entrepreneurship be taught or not? The real question was, who can it be taught to? And I think what we now know is that entrepreneurship can now be taught to those who volunteer. None of you have been drafted. All of you are certifiably insane. I mean, why else would you do something that we know that 90% of you will fail? We also know that in a room like this, and the sum of all the people watching on live cast, there's probably in a room like this, several of you, we're going to make $100 million. Look around. Look around. You should all look around. Who's that going to be? Now, the good news is that those people exist in the room. The bad news is, if you were looking for them, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. Because you ought to go work for them. Some of you can explain it to some of the others. I think you should really go get a job for those guys. All of you have volunteered. What we used to believe is entrepreneurship education takes years in school. You need an MBA, or gee, you got to go to Stanford in the engineering school, and gee, you need to know all these things. But what we now really know is that entrepreneurship education, as I said earlier, is a little theory and a lot practice. And, let me show you, we've actually been able to take photographs of what real-world entrepreneurial education looks like. I captured this photo of what it looks like outside the building. So if you want to look and see, this is what the entrepreneurial process looks like in the real world. And it's kind of hard to teach chaos, in like step 1, chaos, and step 2, chaos. You really got to experience it. Entrepreneurship education is like a priest teaching you sex, right? It's kind of like, because most, educators have not really done this for a couple of years. And so while the theory is great, some of you can explain that to each other. The other thing we used to believe is, all I need is the 5-year forecast. Now, I got to tell you, what's great about, having time to think, being a retired entrepreneur is, we took for granted that this goes in the back of the business plan, it's Appendix A, depending on the type of alcohol or drugs you've had, it gets to be more and more fantastic when you do your forecast. But no one ever observed that the only people who required 5-year plans were the VCs and Soviet Union. Exact same way. What we now also know, and here's kind of one of the points of the presentation, besides the comedy routine, is we now know how to make startups fail less. And while there are different variations of lean and how to do this, I'm just going to share with you my observation of the 3 pieces that we now understand that, to me, kind of add up to an entrepreneurial API. That is, I now have concluded, at least as an educator, there's a minimum standard worldwide that we all need to understand. and again, translate it into your version. But I think we need to know three things. One is, part one, we need to know what a business model is. Whether it's, Alexander Osterwalder's or Ash's, it doesn't matter, but you now need to be thinking about business models. Have any of you seen Osterwalder's business model canvas? Anyone? Right, okay. So we'll be talking about some of the new findings here in a second. But the second piece is, we need some out-of-the-building process to test the hypotheses in our business model. So the second thing every entrepreneur worldwide needs to talk about is business model canvas or some business model hypothesis and some testing process for those hypotheses. And then the third piece we now understand we need to know is some type of iterative and incremental engineering process, right? To actually build the product.
Steve,
Yeah.
you're forgetting something.
Well, wait a minute. Who are you? You're interrupting my presentation. I was describe the business model canvas in detail. Who are you?
Well, I'm Alex Osterwalder. I participated in this.
Well, wait a minute. Presentation, Alexander. What are you going to do?
Well, there's something new that I'd like to show you.
Well, wait a minute. This is my presentation. Really? You want to add some value here?
It would help.
Okay. Well, why don't you do it, Alexander Osterwalder?
So, we figured out that something's missing in this equation, my team and myself, so we tried to go a little bit into that third part, agile engineering, and add something to it. Because I think what we have until now is great, and we learned a lot along the way, but there's something we could add. So, if you look at what we tried to do at the beginning when we came up with the business model canvas, it was to try to find a roadmap, some kind of tool that would help us ask the right questions and test the right thing. Because if you just go out there and test, the problem won't go very far. So we came up with a business model canvas that many of you know. I've seen that. So what about when it comes to products and value propositions? Right? We can build, measure, and learn, which is great, and which we have to do, and I think the ratio that Steve talked about is absolutely crucial. But what if we could have a roadmap before that would help us think before we build? So we came up with something that helps you with the product market fit. So if you have a customer segment over there in the business model canvas and you have a value proposition in the middle, well, you want to figure out how can you create some kind of match, a real fit between them, right? So, Tony Ulwick, and they say, well, we hire products to do things for us. We hire products to do things for us. And we need to figure out, well, what are customers hiring our products for? So Clay, he quotes, I have to point this so the slides advance. This is an MVP, I think. So Clay quotes Harvard professor who's passed away, Ted Levitt, and he says people don't buy a quarter-inch drill, they want a quarter-inch hole. And you've probably seen this again and again. Now, wouldn't it be cool if we could think about this a little bit more in a systematic way? So we need to look at the jobs that customers are trying to get done. So that's the first concept we're going to look at. But once we figured out what customers are trying to get done, we need to ask ourselves and map this out before we actually go talk to customers. Well, what could their biggest pains be? So if you're selling software to a CIO, Chief Information Officer, well, what are the biggest pains? Total cost of ownership, maintenance, learning curve, and so on. So figure out what the biggest pain points are. And then you need to figure out, what do customers expect? What do they think should the outcomes of those jobs be? What do they want? So most of us know that one of the gain of a tool like this, a phone, is, okay, you want to make a call. That's a minimum gain. Well, today, nobody would put a BlackBerry on a table anymore because that hurts our eyes. It's unfair to everybody else in the room. So, the gains, I think these are the last ones who are really doing that. So, the gains are the outcomes that we would like to have, that we expect, that might go beyond what we really want. So that's the customer part. You map it out, and then you go and test. Now let's look at the left-hand side here. We're going to look at the value proposition. Wonderful value proposition there. We're going to map out 3 things to get to the product market fit. 3 things. First one is just a list of the products and services that you're offering. Okay, Apple with the iPod has a device, as a product, the content, the music, movies, and the service would be iTunes and the iTunes Store. So you just make a list. But then you need to explain, how do these products and services really create value? So you're going to look at first the painkillers. How do your products and services kill pains? So see here how we're getting closer to product market fit. We have a beautiful map, which will help us do something before we build. To think it through, but then build and learn very quickly and iterate through this, okay? And then the game creators. So here you have a wonderful map, a second map, that helps you with the agile engineering, okay? Now the important thing is that you have both maps. The business model and the value proposition, because a great value proposition is not enough. The great business model will be the difference between somebody who has failed and somebody who has become a billionaire, okay? So you need both, right? One doesn't exist without the other. Now, of course, what Steve said, we need to test this. So your first business model canvas will fail. You make a new one, will fail. You make a new one, will fail, until you found the right one. So now we have a tool to do the same thing for value propositions. Map out our value proposition, fail, change, until we got it. At the end of the day, we want to have this equation, and then we'll create great business models. And here I'll hand over to Steve again. Thanks a lot for giving me some time. Does it work?